Saturday the 1st, because that's the only time she can really do this with her timing. And so Dr. Laura is actually an audiologist, and I think we met YouTube, my YouTube channel. Am I wrong?
No, I saw you on Facebook.
Okay, so
you came up as somebody because I noticed your banner feed, and so I friend requested you on Facebook.
Yep, and so we're going to put this actually on the Dr. Scott Hearing Expert channel. We're also going to put this on the ministry channel as well, because I think it's going to be relevant in both areas with that too. So first off, let's kind of get to know Dr. Laura. So tell me a little bit about yourself with that too.
So do you want, as far as like my field, my career, or kind of where I've been? Okay. So I graduated from, I started my college at North Carolina State. So I went there and I transferred from North Carolina State to University of Nevada, Reno, where I did my undergrad in speech pathology and audiology. Oh. And because the UNR, University of Nevada, Reno, did not have a master's program for audiology, we ended up having to go to a different school. So that's where I started applying all over the country. And I ended up at University of Memphis for my master's. And then I ended up graduating in 2002 with my master's, I believe. Yes, that would be it. And then I got pregnant my last semester of grad school. But I was by myself. And so I graduated 6 months pregnant, moved out to California, and had Ethan in 2003. And then I ended up going back and then started working and started my CFY. So I started my CFY in Northern California in 2003. And in 2005, I picked up on a tax return and my last paycheck and bought a practice and moved out. And I had that practice for 5 years. I sold it in 2010, and that was in Grass Valley, California. I got divorced, and I ended up moving down to Mississippi, where I participated. And I believe I was either the second or third Ascent audiology practice to open. And it was part of a kind of pilot program down in Mississippi. Well, I ended up not signing on to ownership with Ascent Audiology. It was not something I wanted to do, and decided to partner ways. And due to me not wanting to sign on ownership, I had to relocate out of state due to my non-compete. So I just gotten divorced, just relocated my family, got myself in a situation where 2 years, it was just not the right fit, and had to relocate my family all over again. And we ended up in Maryland for a very, very short stint that did not work out, and then ended up down in Alabama working with an ENT. And that's where I was from 2012, of August 2012 to about January 2015. And learned a lot, very rural area, very cool area. Loved it down there, but it was just time. I could feel that the industry had been shifting big time. And I could just feel this overwhelming sense of fear all the time. This was probably 2014, the fall, winter of 2014. And this is when Phonak had just gone into Costco. There were a lot of things that were happening at this time that I was trying to wrap my head around. But I know that I've been practicing from 2003 to 2015, and I was living and dying every month by the hearing aid sale. Right. And it's no way to live. And I was like, everything was fear-based. And I felt like I had to take a step back, and I didn't know what to do. I just knew that I had to take a step back. And that's when I went to go work for Unitron in tech support in January 2015. And I spent 5 years with the Sonova company and was part of that transition, and some very interesting things that happened there, but learned a lot about the industry, learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about, just people in general in this process. So, but there's definitely been a shift in this industry, and there's a shift that I'm not comfortable with. And there are some things that are happening that ethically I am not comfortable with, because I know where we started. Right. I know what we came from. I know what we've evolved from. And I'm at a point at a crossroad where I'm drawing my line in the sand. And I said, we're at a point that we have some major, major ethics things going on as a field, as a profession, with our colleagues. And there's some things that we need to get to the bottom of, and the things that we need to start discussing and having conversations about. And we've gotten into this kind of group think, one-way thinking. No one's ever allowed to ask questions. And, we just got to that point. So I started kind of feeling a lot of things. I started having panic attacks when I was working at Sonova. And I started, there's a lot of things I started experiencing, being there and being under this group think and just watching the culture change that happened and watching the shift happen in this industry. And I knew I had to get out. And so I ended up leaving and opening a private practice. We opened 3 weeks before COVID pandemic shutdown hit in California.
Holy cow.
So left my job. I'm the sole primary much my sole financial provider for my family. Started a practice, got shut down 3 weeks later. Well, I'm in a different place now. I'm in actually a really good spot. 2 years later, I'm in a spot right now where I have started with an ENT in Las Vegas. I'm there Monday through Wednesday. We're kind of bootstrapping that. I have an amazing partner out of Southern California. We're working through this, and we're just building, and we're building kind of from scratch. We're kind of just, trying out. We're not really putting a lot of money into it and just based off our expertise and just kind of fitting the need. And then I do compensation and pension examinations outside of California in Stockton. So I do that every other week. And so I do that for a lot of that as well. I also am a peer reviewer for a workman's comp company. So I see all the reviews that come in. And I am the one that is, every time an audiologist, hearing instrument specialist requests hearing aids for workman's comp, the workman's comp sends it to me, this particular group, and I'm reviewing if these, things are adequate or if we're overkilling it, different things like that. So there's a lot that I've seen. There's a lot that I observed. There's a lot I'm not comfortable with. And there's a lot of point where I really do feel like we are at a pinnacle point in our profession that I am not okay with where it's going, and I'm flipping the switch.
Well, so I'm gonna, because we're on both channels and some people know what audiologists are. I mean, we're a profession that is, I always say we have applied sciences, applied mathematics, applied anatomy and physiology from the neck up, and all of these applied, multidisciplinary in areas. So we're hearing experts with that too. So just to kind of give you an example. Now, she and I both have taken that, we did our undergrad, then we went a master's, and later on we got our doctorate, right? Am I wrong on that? Okay.
That's correct. That's correct. And I even forgot about that part. I got went back for my doctorate in 2000. After I had Cooper in 2007, I went back for my doctorate, and he was about 7 months old, from 2008 to 2010 at the University of Florida.
Yeah.
So I did do that.
And there are ways that, we sometimes, and we're working full time and we're doing a doctorate, which is really, I remember doing that in 2003, and my son too. My son's 3, and he wants to bug me in the background. Daddy, look at this. And I'm like, I can't do this. And I'm working 100, easily 100-hour weeks, when I'm working and doing that stuff. And you got, a class every single month. And it was just tiring, with that too. But what she's talking about too, that you have to hear, is Sonova is a parent company of a couple areas. And see, they had Phonak, which is a hearing aid manufacturer, a worldwide manufacturer. And Unitron used to be a smaller, I would call them a tier 2 type of company. The tier 1s are basically what we used to call them the big 6, and so the big 6s are anywhere from $500 million to $2 or $3 billion companies. Okay, we're not talking about like Samsung or Amazon type of levels, but we're talking about significant companies with that. And so these companies have been doing it for a very long time, for almost every single one of them, and I have a totally different way that audiologists will pick their hearing aids, and because these guys tend to spend about $100 million in research and design every year. Now, when we drop down to the tier 2 manufacturers, they're $25 to $40 million companies. They spend maybe $1 million or so in that range of research and development, or R&D. Then we have the tier 3 manufacturers, and those are the really tiny ones. They could be local kind of things. They kind of did some manufacturing. We have one in Tulsa that used to do it, but they're the really tiny ones. And years ago when Laura started even, but actually more with me, because I remember this, we used to have 45 different manufacturers, and the big boys ate them up. Okay, so Unitron's just one of them. Lori is another one that used to be with Unitron as well. So it used to be Lori that was bought out by Unitron, and then it was swallowed in, and then Unitron was swallowed up by Phonak. Well, they had to go, well, we need to have a parent company, so we got to call it Sonova. And so that's how that kind of thing works. Now, again, these are global companies. Some of them are made in America, but they normally have significant stuff that they do in America. Okay, but they also have manufacturing plants all over the world. So just
I do believe, I'm not, I don't want to speak out of turn.
No,
I do believe the United States, though, this is where, because it can be a global company. I understand that. And that was one of the things I noticed being at a Sonova company and being with the Swiss is that you have the Swiss culture that comes with it, but you also have the United States culture. And so, what's really interesting to me, so it's like,
that butts heads on situations.
But I was like, okay, so I felt like I gave a lot of leeway for a lot of those times. It's like, because it was more like, well, we have different cultures here. So, just because we don't do it necessarily here, this is here. So we didn't know how much was a kind of like a different way of looking things, different perspectives, as far as that's concerned. But what I find very interesting is that we have these very global decisions being made. However, I believe the United States supports the majority is the largest market share.
Right. Yeah.
Am I not correct?
They're the driver.
They're
the fascinating driver. And then we have the other socialist type nations that have different amounts of, hearing aids are free to the public and different kind of unique socialism ways. And we're not going to get too much into that point. But
another time, definitely another time, I'd love to get into that. But I mean, kind of like I know where we're at today. So
So what we're really going to operate within, and Dr. Laura's got a great point. She started talking a little bit about ethics. And I remember when the state of Oklahoma decided that we needed 4 hours of ethics. And I remember walking in, and there was you couldn't go to any other ethical thing. You had to like show up to their little thing because the way that they had operated the situation. And I remember sitting in there complaining up one side down the other. I'm like, I got to go to an ethics thing to show that I'm ethical. And there was a manufacturer rep that was behind me from another company called Oticon, and I know him very well, very, very cool guy that you guys would love him. And he was saying literally the same thing as he's walking in the door. And I looked around and I'm like, dude, and one of the things that we have is
real quick. I don't mean to interrupt you. I do want to stop here because I think that because this is very personal, and our industry is very small. Right. And I think because there's been a lot going on, I want to preface everything by saying I believe 90% of our industry is good. Yeah. I believe that 90% of us is good people. We're trapped in a really bad situation right now, and there's been a lot of stuff going on. So I want to make sure that through this talk and everything we're talking, that there's no blame. It's not blame. That's not a blame thing, but we're in a situation. We're in a very dire situation right now where we need to start asking some questions, and we need to have some accountability. And this is not a blame thing, but we really have got to get to the point that there's a lot that we don't know, and that we've got to leave it to the experts that do. And we've got to stop, and we've got to really just kind of listen to the ears and stop talking so much. And so I do want to preface everything there.
Right.
If I do come off today as I'm not blaming anybody, but I really think that we really need as a human population to take a step back. And we need to take some accountability and just ask some questions. And let's have some discussion.
Exactly. But, I think one of the struggles, and Laura and I were talking about this, several days ago or yesterday or whatever it was. And we were talking about a word, and I want to use, so I'm going to pick this one out of what you and I were talking about yesterday. And it was this issue of validation and verification. And now here's the thing. Ethics is an idea made up by a company or a group. Now, they can read aside what those ethics are based upon pragmatism. What pragmatism does is it defines within a small autocracy, a group of people who make a choice to say, this is ethical and this is not. Now, every industry has nothing just to do with audiology.
Sure.
But like in 1978, it was unethical for an audiologist to dispense a hearing aid. Right. And yet, a few years later, they were like, well, now it's fully ethical. So we're not talking about a moral code.
Correct.
And this is absolutely a big problem that most people they don't even understand their own moral stance. And I want to bring this over because I'm going to use some biblical terms and we're going to come to the words in Greek. I want to share with you why the words in Greek are so powerful, because when we say truth, we go, Laura might say my truth or this truth or that truth, and it's a little bit nebulous. But let me say something to you in a different way. Pontius Pilate walks over to Jesus, and when Jesus is not pleading his case, and he basically says, what is veritas? What that word means is where we pulled it from, the Greek, came over to Latin, and then in English called verification. So, validation was a type of verification. So validation in today's culture, 21st century culture, means Laura has she is a Los Angeles Rams fan, okay? And if I don't validate her choice and go, I just hate the Rams, let's say. I mean, that was my statement. And I'm not validating her. And my response is, I don't have to like your club, kind of thing. That and it is irrelevant if I like your thing. But see, some people, they'll go, well, that's my truth. And then here's what they do. They pull it over, and this it's gonna make sense. And Laura's gonna kind of get into this a little bit more, but they pull it over into validation. And then they try to say, the political correct terms and all this other stuff. And I'm like, would you shut up? I'm not going to be rude here, but I'm sorry, but I'm going to be pretty blunt on that. We need to operate with verification. So if a scientist or a researcher comes up with a theory, and she has spent a bunch of time upon that theory, she doesn't need validation. She needs verification.
Correct.
Because if she's wrong, it's okay, but she has to pitch the baby out with the bathwater at that moment, maybe, versus we're always looking for validation. And so she's going to talk a little bit about the difference between that, what she saw. And I would like you to kind of deal with that from a manufacturing standpoint too.
I think from so from a manufacturing standpoint, I think I've seen a lot, and there's like a lot of, so verification very much is not validation. So maybe we need to agree on some things too. I think, because we were talking about this the other day, we don't have a lot of absolute truths in audiology. We have a lot of because it's so subjective. And I think we were talking about difference alignments and I think because sound is so subjective, and that we have somebody. So I think, can we agree? And I think we need to kind of come up with some truths that we do have. Can we agree as audiologists, based off the experience that we've had throughout all the years, that there's not one single fitting formula for one person?
Correct.
That it's not, that hearing loss and fitting a hearing aid is not a cookie cutter approach.
Right.
We have some ideas, right? So we have some ideas with what we're doing, and we kind of basically use all these tools to kind of put in the picture. But what I've noticed a huge trend is that when we went from analog to digital, we didn't have a really good way for verification. We couldn't have a really good way to measure the digital signal. It was a lot more absolute. And you're actually going to be more well-versed than I was, because I was on that cusp. We learned on screwdrivers with the potentiometers, but we were in the middle of the digital transition. So we were verifying on the old analog stuff, but learning on the new digital stuff and trying to program, but we couldn't verify it. And so that was very challenging for us. So we had to come up with other ways to verify. And that's where listening came in. And that's when we learned how to cancel. And that's what I remembered. It was that my graduate program had nothing on oral rehabilitation. It had nothing on counseling. It was always about all these different, very regimented things, but nothing about how the person was validated and how they heard. We could verify all day long. We know what the hearing aid was doing, but how that translated to the patient was a whole different ballgame. And so that's when, and that's when we had this whole huge thing. Now, this is in the early 2000s where we were dealing with the cosmetic versus the practical application. We were so much more successful with BTEs, but cosmetically it wasn't. So we were trying to figure out, and that's why the huge thing with Rick, because we were able to do more modifications. And so that's what's really interesting too, is like we had to, because everything was on trial, we had to make these people happy, or else they would go back for full credit. And so we had to modify ear molds. We had to play, we had to work with algorithms, we had to prescribe, we had to listen. And so all of a sudden, and because we didn't have those tools to make sure we were doing, we had to verify and then provide validation in other ways that kind of come around with it when we didn't have the real ear systems. But now we've gone back in the other direction. We have come into, like, I want to say real ear shaming and real ear Nazis. And they've badmouthed everybody that's done it. Well, I've been in a nonprofit and I've ran real ear nonstop. And I'm saying, I don't think we're doing our patients any more of a service if we can't even agree. Yeah, we're verifying that the hearing aid is doing what it's doing, but it's not validating that the sound is good.
So let's explain that too, because, I come at this, I started as a vocal performance scholarship major at 2 different universities. And so I'm a singer and I have perfect pitch. And she and I were talking a little bit about this. What she was referencing is a word called difference limens, Limens. What difference limens are, and let's just say are you a musician at all, Laura?
Not at all.
Okay.
That's what's so funny about this. Can't play, can't sing.
Okay.
But so music is really powerful to me.
So let's say that Laura has a wider difference lineman than even the normal person. And I'm not trying to beat her up here. It's just fact. Okay. Has nothing to do with her hearing. Okay. It's her ability.
That's why I have to rely on my patient.
Right. Yeah. So ability to understand what pitches and loudnesses are. So you have a difference between one pitch and another. And so let's say Laura and I decide to go to, a group where they're going to play guitars and they're it's a concert kind of thing. She sits beside me and she goes, "It sounds great." A person who's normal, like my wife is actually very normal on this, would sit on this other side of me, let's say, and she would say, it sounds okay, but kind of, I don't know what I notice about it. Now, Scott, who has perfect pitch and can sing, been on stage thousands of times singing, I'd be ripping that guitar out of the dude's hand, retuning it and giving it back. Okay. So when you talk about perceptions, our industry never actually deals with that. See, musicians and engineers are one of the most annoying people that every audiologist ever has to deal with, because they're picky about what they're hearing. And so that's why we need to think outside of ourselves. And I know a lot of us do, but a lot of us struggle because there's this moving target of what verification is, and we want to be validated. I'll give you an example. Laura was kind of referencing this because I came from that analog era a long time ago. I started in 1991. I was coming out of college, and in 1995, I think it was, I go to my first AAA American Academy of Audiology in Dallas, Texas. And first off, it was funny because now I'm a musician. I listen to things loud all the time. It's part of the reason why I have some hearing loss with this. So I'm a loud, listener. It's just part of who I am. And I'm listening to, they were doing bands that were in audiology things that were like, screaming loud. And I'm going, wait, we're about hearing loss, and yet we got these loud, what? Now, here's the funny thing. There was a conference. Yeah,
That's so true.
It's totally, and it gets worse now. So there was this conference thing about CIC hearing aids, which means the smallest completely in the canal hearing aids. And so the dudes get up, and I don't want to name their names because they're not trying to beat them up.
Well, yeah.
The dude gets up and goes, I've done 40 hearing aids, and I've done 25, and I've done 16, and I've done 18, and I'm listening to this conversation, and it was just because I was working in a private manufacturer and dispensing group in the Tulsa area, and I had done more than all of them put together by ×2. I'd overseen 3 or 4 times more of my other dispensers that were working underneath me than all of them. And over half of the information that they were pitching about these hearing aids were completely wrong, and I knew it from 1995. It's only because I had the experience to see it.
Right.
And we were looking at not validation, but verification. And so we were pitching out ideas that people had done. And this happens all the time. And you hear people who have a thought, an idea, an opinion, and they elevate it to the point of absolute truth.
Correct.
And that is a big problem. And Laura, we're gonna transition over here because I want you to hear her part of why she's feeling the way that she does. And it would never have happened, frankly, until about 2020. Some of the crazy things that we're actually experiencing and feeling. But I want Laura to kind of tell you about how she was awakened, because there's a great awakening happening the worldwide, and we're seeing things that we have never seen before, and that is actually changing a lot of viewpoints. Because I'm gonna jump in and let her go at that one. So
I guess oh gosh, I don't. Because you can go to my Facebook page and you can actually pretty much, if you go to my Facebook, you can follow the whole progress.
Right.
So I'm going to go with what I expected. I woke up on election night, and I knew it was when I really, on that pinnacle moment where I knew something was so wrong that we weren't just dealing with, it was not, because like there was kind of like death by 1,000 paper cups. There's a lot of red flags along the way. But election night's when it hit that something much deeper, much more nefarious, something really bad was going on, that where they weren't just telling me a biased story, they were blatantly gaslighting me on TV, and they're looking me in my eyes and lying. So I knew we were not just dealing with a bias, meaning that we were dealing with full-blown propaganda. Right. And full-blown propaganda is a whole different beast. And this is not dealing with a hard copy or an Inside Edition or a National Enquirer. Right. Propaganda is something completely different, and it was on our mainstream media, and that's when I knew we were in trouble. Right. So that's when I start putting all the pieces together. So I'm going to and I think where we need to kind of be, because we've got to find some common ground right now, because we have an industry right now of professionals that we have so many of us that are scared. I'll tell you this much: I've had to block so many people, not because I don't like them, because I know these people's hearts. I know they're good people. Right. Because out of fear. I'm scared. I'm scared of them. I look at the behavior, what I've observed over the past 1.5, 2 years, even actually longer than that. And I know that these are the people that would have turned Anne Frank's family in. I'm not speaking lightly about that. Right. This is how real it is for us. And so I started putting, so I think common sense wise, I think, because I've dealt with crises before. I've dealt with crises where we're in triage situations. And I think when we first had the pandemic happened, when we realized we went from, oh boy, we have a pandemic, or we have something going on, to we're down to 2 weeks to, flatten the curve. We're shutting everything down. Can we agree that escalated pretty quickly? Yep. Am I wrong on that one, or did escalate at a pretty quick pace?
It was like lightning speed.
It was lightning speed. So it was like, so it was, we were all confused. And I think that what I was expecting, and I think the general population, I don't want to speak for everybody, I think, but general common sense and rule of thumb would be, we're all pretty good about doing what's pretty good for the common good.
Right.
That, you know, that if it means it's a little hardship, we're always going to kind of, for the most part, we're going to triage, we're going to go kind of see what, we're really good at doing that. And so I think most of us at the beginning were like, okay, we remember Fauci going on and saying about masks not being necessary, but we're like, you know what, we don't know enough about this virus yet. So if it mitigates some droplet spread for the first couple of weeks while we figure things out, we'll get this going. No big deal. We'll put in the extra effort. And I believe most of us were kind of on that common theme, and we were trying to find as much information we had. So I believe, generally speaking, what we were under the impression, or I think majority of people, the 2 weeks was us first to stop everybody moving around, because I mean, I know I was back and forth from the Bay Area in the epicenter, you know, didn't even know what was going on. And we didn't know how the symptoms were being spread. We didn't have information. I think, and I believe that a lot of us felt the first weeks was kind of like a reset, like let's gather data and triage and take a hold of the situation.
Right.
And then, and I believe we all thought that we were probably going to have some commonalities of, like, you know, have maybe a uniform way of seeing what medicines were working, what therapeutics are working, what's, you know, but that's not what happened. And what ended up happening was completely something different. And then now you look back and it's like, people are not functioning off of common sense anymore. They're not functioning off of science. We're not functioning off of things that make sense. We're making very autocratic, extreme, life-altering, forceful decisions that are affecting people's lives and not giving people a choice. And it's like, I'm at the point right now that I can't go in. It's against my conscience. It's against all my ethics. I can't go in. I have to go on record publicly and say, I am not supporting these vaccination mandates.
Right.
I'm ashamed of my profession for what they've done. And the fact of the matter is that we are not following science right now. We have censorship. And I think that we have to agree that science and censorship cannot coexist. If they we don't have science.
Because
we don't have science.
Do you see where she's going on this, people? When we initialized this part of validation versus verification. And so here's what you're hearing, and this is why you got to break this in yourself, is that you're hearing validate, that they say follow the science, right? And you hear this all the time. And I go, okay, if I don't have to follow something that doesn't get verified.
Correct.
So if I know that a mask can do, I mean, a mask, when we look at what happens, the droplet of a virus, specifically of a COVID virus, is 0.1 microns. A mask does anywhere from 0.4 microns up to 0.7 microns, which means that even custom fitted N95 mask is going to do no more than about, you know, it's 4 times less capable of still touching that thing. So we talk about droplets, but we have, we have messed our brains up in this kind of thing.
Yep.
And I want to share with you a story I've frankly not said on any of my channel points. Get this. There is a company in Tulsa called Quick Trip, okay? Just a little thing from it. No, it's different in every place that happens, and it's a gas station, but they have all kinds of cool convenience stores, right? Stuff. So this is really early on. So think back what happens with your life. Gotta be April or May. Now, I long before had been broken of this idea, because I've been training masks, just like Laura has been trained in masks. We're not talking about two people that don't know how to wear a mask and don't know what a mask does. Okay, we're not talking about people like, you know, hang it on the visor all the time, and you know, all this crazy stuff that happens. And so I watched this story. So get this. So the guy goes and gets his drink, and it's a plastic cup. So he gets the drink, brings it up to the desk. And I wish I had my iPhone. I wish I could have videoed it, right? And he sits it down and he can't get the lids. So the employee reaches behind the counter, grabs tongs, and he grabs the lid and he brings it over and he goes, and he drops it and he goes, oh crap, grabs another one, brings it over to the guy. Now, literally, I'm watching this from the side. Both of them have masks on, okay, and no gloves, which is even funnier. And so he reaches up to try to grab the lid. He's not even touching the tong. Grab the lid. I can't. Well, and they finally, I'm just going like, grab the sucker. And so he finally grabs it, takes it off, shoves it on his thing. That's not the funniest part. He reaches in his pocket, grabs out $2.50, and he's got change. And he touches the guy's hands. And then the guy opens the drawer, goes, pops it in there, pulls it up, and touches the change to the other guy's hands. And I'm like, I mean, no. Here's what I'm saying. Laura's laughing, and if you're not understanding what happened. See, if this was a real pandemic level,
right,
both sides would have walked in with their gloves. They would have walked in with a hazmat coverall suit. Okay. Mm-hmm. He would never have bought anything from the convenience store other than the most basic kind of thing. And he would have taken, let's say with his gloves, he would have walked in, touched the things, and then walked out and thrown the gloves away at a hazmat bin on the side. Mm-hmm. That's following the science. And by the way,
exactly.
If you don't understand this, go watch a movie that everything that we're watching is based upon is Contagion from 2013.
Yes.
It is an amazing movie, and there are several others like this. And in that movie...
And I watched that. I actually pulled it up and watched it right before that, like why it was happening, because I was trying to make sense. I was trying to understand like the R naughts and different things like that. Right. But what I realized is like when I was watching Contagion, there are things that didn't take place. Like we didn't have, it wasn't the contact surfaces. I mean, like I've been on a plane twice a week since May of 2020. And I was flying pretty much twice a week with, sometimes I'd break a week a month, but then, till September of 2021. And then I'm still flying every other week, with everything going on. And I just like, nothing makes sense. It's like you have all this social distancing, these masks on the planes, and you're lined up and the planes are packed.
Yeah,
you cannot tell me any of this stuff makes sense.
You guys are rubbing shoulders. And so you got to say, wait a second, it doesn't make sense. And I was having a conversation with my parents who got vaccinated and did the whole thing. And they were, and I said, Dad, let me ask you a question. Did you walk into the restaurant with your mask on? Yes, I did. And I said, so did you happen to walk out to the table with her wearing her mask? Yes, she did. And I said, so did you sit down at the table and take your mask off? And he goes, yes. And I said, wait, did COVID go away as soon as you sat down? And he goes, well, it was the first time I got it. He didn't go out for about a year. And I was going, and I said, that should mess with your brain because COVID should exist down, sea level in essence versus up here. And you're going, what?
But and also too, like, here's my thing. If it was a true pandemic, I'm not saying COVID's not real. We have a virus. We have a spike protein, and we have a vaccine that's doing irreparable damage to people right now that we've got to have another, that we're going to be going into in just a second, but we're doing a lot of preface here, as far as that's concerned. We have a virus. Is not the fact that this doesn't exist. We know the spike protein exists. How it got here is irrelevant at this point, even though we do. It's just we still need to be able to treat it, and we still need to be able to, like, when has it ever been okay to sit there and say, just call us when your lips turn blue, that, and not have any information with everything that's going on. So we're not, I want to be very clear. We're not saying that people have not died of COVID.
Sure.
Well, I'm saying that people have died of medical malpractice and mismanagement of it due to censorship, due to poor practices. And the fact of the matter is we have been through the biggest fear mongering thing that we've ever gone through, and that we have just in general, a population that's under a mass psychosis right now.
Right.
And it's so obvious. And it's like, so it's kind of like, so we've got to wake people up. And that is actually to segue too. It's like, I woke up and it was so obvious to me because it would make, because everything started making sense.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. But what shocked me was we're a year later. And that's what I wrote, like, I kind of like, I knew election night. And then I started digging and then I started digging. I'm like, oh my gosh, and saw how deep and dark it was and kind of what's going on. And I was waiting. And when I saw the information on ivermectin, I think I found out about ivermectin in November. Mm-hmm. I started seeing the Senate hearings and about warnings against the vaccine. Then I started seeing all the censorship. And I'm like, and that's when I went, hold up. We can't be doctors and have censorship. Amen. And what scared the hell out of me was how many of my colleagues that were like thinking it was okay. And I'm like, no, it's with science. I understand that we have feelings about the data. We don't have feelings about the numbers. We have feelings of how the numbers are interpreted, period. But
which is validation.
Has to be unobliterated. Correct. That's verification is data only. And the thing is, we don't have a data set to work with. We are not functioning. Right. We are a function of a politicized science. We have so much censorship right now. But the problem is what we're facing, and is a very, very scary part of the vocal portion of our profession. I don't believe the majority of our profession feels the way that they do, but the vocal portion of our profession has shamed, has forced, has coerced, has caused so many people in our profession to get these vaccines and it's like, we're at a point that it's got to stop and we have to have a discussion. And if someone has got to do something.
You're talking to two business owners. Now, let me tell you, and you have employees, right, with you?
I'm in a different situation. Don't worry about it. Yes, business owner.
But you know, she's had it before with this. And so I've got a total of 10 people, you know, around me, including myself. And let me say what I actually asked this question. I mentioned this question mentioned this conversation with my people. And I said, let me ask you something. Forget about the vaccine for just a hair. Let's say what we were really talking about is toenail or cuticle care, okay? And my response as another human being, do I have the right to talk about your cuticle care? And the answer is, well, if you bring it up, I guess we could have a conversation about it, but I don't have HIPAA agreements, privacy agreements to bring that puppy up. Now, when someone walks into a grocery store and says, do you have your vaccine? I always say this kind of thing. I say, did you sign my HIPAA agreement? And they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you just asked a question. I mean, do you want to know how many times I've had my ACL repaired? Do you want to know about my septoplasty? I mean, which part? Do you want to know about my hearing loss? Do you want to know? And here's the funny thing that no one wants to talk about in our field as audiologists. Do you know that 1992 American Disabilities Act actually says that we're a protected, I'm that person, we're a protected category from wearing any kind of mask of any type. So we are a protected category in that, and we don't want to talk about that. And so we have these problems that are coming up. And I said to my staff, and I said, so if I said that every single one of you better get your toenails done at XYZ joint, you would say, wait, I don't want to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't, recommend that I do that. I mean, you should have no right to say that. And I say, exactly. Let me put it to another way with the vaccine, even if I was terrified. Now, she and I had talked about this. Sorry about my cough here, but 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, I almost died in a hospital right before COVID. And it was one of my heavy parts of my waking event. And 3 days later, I walked out of the ICU. So I have a very different perspective on life with that too. So I'm just not fearful of anything. When you were really pretty much died, you have a miracle event, it's going to break you of that kind of stuff too. But I say, so let me just say something fascinating. So a vaccine comes out in less than a year, and I don't care who talks about it. A vaccine comes out in less than a year. The most vaccines have to take 7 years to actually come out and be tested, verified, not validated, verified. So, and do you know that the big pharma is actually deleted from culpability of the vaccine injuries? The governments are deleted from that issue. And I've had this conversation with my staff. And I said, so if Scott decides that you guys need to get a vaccine and you have an injury, and by the way, one of the first injury points is called Bell's palsy. Bell's palsy is a drooping of the half of the face. And they say it's a mild response. And they said it would last for 2 months. And that was the verification. You were like, how do you know it will last for 2 months? You haven't verified it would definitely last or never come. I mean, your face would come back to a normal state.
I'm going to bring up a point for you. Okay. Because Bell's palsy is actually a very harmless, physically harmless disease. But do you know how many patients would rather anything else than having Bell's palsy? Because it's very physically and mentally impactful. And when you can't smile. And so it's like, I guess my issue is that we have, okay, so let's just take everything out of the equation. We have options. There are other options besides the vaccine. I don't care. It's not, I have the right to determine what goes into my body based off my own medical health. We have never been able to agree on a hearing aid fitting formula. So you mean to tell me that we can agree on a one-size medical treatment for the entire human race on something that was been researched less than a year? I mean, let's have some common sense and some rational thoughts. And so we know from the research, open conversations, like, so can we agree? There are people that are dying from the vaccine. I don't care if you want to believe that or not on some of these people. It's true. It's true. We've seen them, the data, it's been censored. We have people that are dying. We've seen people that have disabilities. We've had neurological damage. We've seen across clinics an exponential increase in sun onset hearing losses. We've seen increases in tinnitus. We've seen the Bell's palsy. We've seen vertigo. We've seen it. And there's multiple. If you start going and you start asking maternity wards, they're having an increase in stillbirths. And so regardless, okay, so you know what? Maybe it's more, maybe on a percentage level or whatever, it's not as high. But the problem is that we still have a right to sit there and mitigate our own risk. Because, it's especially since we know the vaccine does not stop transmission. It'd be one thing if it stopped transmission, but it doesn't. All it does is potentially attenuate your symptoms. So I am no more safer with the vaccine or not with the vaccine against my patient population. And I will give our field this. I think most of us going in the beginning, our biggest fear was hurting someone else. I believe we got so scared that we potentially could have killed somebody because of the population that we dealt with. And I actually do believe, we talk about people that haven't woken up yet and what's taken out. I do feel there's a significant portion of our actual profession and population that are in a real trauma state right now that can't get out and they need help getting out. And because they're in just this constant fear of playing. I also believe we have another set of our profession that's kind of the woke mob that we got to deal with but that's for another day. But we're kind of triaging right now. So, but knowing that we have a vaccine does not stop transmission. The only thing that's going to do is attenuate symptoms. It doesn't make us any safer to our patients with or without it. That we need some real options. And I am the sole financial provider for my family. I had to pull my husband from work. He had to stay home with my kids this year and homeschool him. We've all had to make changes. I didn't get it. I finally got it. We got over it. We're recovered as a family. We're good. We were on a ton of preventative stuff. We were taking a preventative ivermectin. We were doing all this. So it's done. It's over with. I have the antibodies. I don't need the vaccine now. Why is that not being recognized? But it's like, I felt like I've been on a plane for, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just throw in here with this. What you guys got to catch and you got a doctor here talking about this. Okay, she has her clinical doctorate with this, and yet she understands, because she has to learn about bacterium and all those issues that kind of go in there, and some pharmacology as well. Now, let's just say a few things. One of my personal areas is I love history. I have studied history left and right, and when we talk about a pandemic, the number one problem is death rate or mortality rate. That's what we get scared about. Okay.
Correct.
So, for instance, the R naught that was talked about in the Contagion film, the mortality rate was a 7 percentile, which meant that as much as 50 million people worldwide had died from that particular illness in the fictional, little fakeish with the way that they did this, but a fictional thing in Contagion. Now, and so we have this conversation. Now, the other thing that no one wants to talk about is when you are immune from a disease. And so, let's go back to the plague. When the plague occurred in the 14, 15, 16, 1700s, okay, and it kept coming on, what would happen to a town is they would have a 50% mortality rate, depending on the situation, and the people that had it and survived, they were immune. They were immune from the plague. Now, their kids might have been, little ones, and they were immune from the plague too. Now, here's the funny thing: that thing would show up in the grandchild time frame, because those people would die off, and so it would keep coming back. And so we didn't understand virology and other issues that kind of go along with that. But now we have to say, well, you're only non-immunocompromised when you have a vaccine. And yet, wait, no, you have to get a second vaccine. No, you have to get a third booster. And then we're talking about the fourth booster. And in Israel, they're talking about a fifth booster. And I go, when does it stop?
And I think too, it's just like, when are we going to start using the data? And it's like, you look at Uttar Pradesh, India, that pretty much eradicated COVID, or very able to maintain it with ivermectin. And the thing is like, we have things like ivermectin. It's been censored. We know that. The data's out there to support it. Right. It's just like just common sense wise, we had the emergency authorization for the vaccine because we didn't have therapeutics available. We needed something, so, but I mean, I don't understand like why we're not mitigating risk. And like, the thing is like, to me, common sense tells you, if we have a drug that's been tested on billions of people, we know it's effective. Over 50, 60 we know years. We had the cytokine. What's that? 50,
60 years, and including HCQ.
Nobel Prize for safety is safer than aspirin. And then here's the thing. I've been taking it in animal form since January weekly as preventative, and I've had my labs done because we had to do something. We knew the vaccine was not going to work. And look what's happening in Israel. Look at what's happening in your highest vaccinated states. We have all the variants that are causing. It's not, let's really start using our brains. What's going on right now, And so we need to come up with something and have an option. And so we have ivermectin. So my thing is that we have something that's safe. So worst case scenario, it didn't work. What does it hurt? So if it didn't work and it doesn't hurt anybody, why are we not allowed to have that option? And then I guess what I'm even having a harder time is, I am not smarter than anybody else. I just listen and I observe. It's not like I have some different education. If I knew about ivermectin and I'm watching it, I want to know, where's the accountability for all the manufacturers that are mandating it to our colleagues?
Right.
Or have coerced them? or the people. And the thing is that when we have, and the thing, my concern is who's fighting for these people. Right. And it's like, and so it's really funny because I was talking to, I don't like doing this. I don't like being outspoken. I get nervous. I have anxiety. I'm actually an introvert. But when things get so bad, or I feel like we have so many things that I just can't make right of it, and I'm a really big believer in truth, I feel so compelled that I have to speak out. So I'm probably going to have a hard time dealing with possibly some of the ramifications of me speaking out today, but I'm at a point that it's gotten too important that we just can't do it anymore. But I want to know, to the manufacturers, why in the hell it was mandated or pretty much coerced on most of these employees. I can't say for every manufacturer, but I can say for a lot of them. I know what they went through. And when you put a person in a position, have to choose between their livelihood and a vaccine and making them play Russian roulette, when they have they have millions and millions of dollars. They spent $100 million on research and development. They couldn't sit there and find this out and figure out different options for their employees to stay safe.
Exactly.
Really?
See, that's
billions of dollars in manufacturers. And so I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm calling stop. I'm putting my drop line in the sand. That's where I'm at.
I think and that's where
I don't care. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, no, it's okay. I think that's where, so we're kind of pushing on this hour here with that too.
Absolutely.
And Laura and I can go on for a long time because we always tend to, when we talk, it's an hour and a half. Okay. So every single time it's kind of fun. But one of the things that I talk about with people is where's your rational thought? Again, as I said to my employees, if you can't sue the pharmacy companies and you can't sue the government, who do you think you'd sue if you had an injury? The guy who told you had to get it for your job, because frankly, that is a major risk. Now, there is going to be a point in time, by the way, guys, truth doesn't just get shoved aside. One of my biggest problems that I had with a business partner years and years ago, who was an alcoholic. My problem with him wasn't his alcoholism. My problem with him were the lies. And I want to tell you what lies actually do. I want you to think about a lake and fish who are dying. They will come up to the surface and they'll just stay there. And it makes the lake stink. See, lies, when we don't want to acknowledge them, or we have things that are we're not in our logic form. And I'm going to end a statement with this. When we're not in our logic form, after a while, people go, there's just too many lies. And and here's the thing. This thing's going to flip. And when it flips, guys, and by the way, it's coming. That moment in time is coming. Quick. And we like to call it the red pill event. But when that thing flips, guess what? You as business owners and, comptrollers and everything else are going to be you're going to be in line for the lawsuits, and they will literally take you down. And I say,
and we are at that point. And I think I do want to say, I do think I've seen a lot and witnessed a lot and been a part of a lot. I've been the punching bag for a lot of people in this industry. That I've been through a lot of trauma, and it is what it is. But it gives me a very unique perspective, and it gives me a lot of empathy. And so I hold no judgment on anybody, but I do believe there's a huge, I know I'm fighting for them. I mean, because we're underground. There's a big group of us that are underground right now. Right. We have to find ways to communicate. So that tells you kind of where we're at as a community, as a profession. If we are having to secretly communicate with one another and to avoid being, it's just, that's where we're at. I have a lot of people that I'm fighting for right now that are very scared. And so I'm just putting it out there. So I am not going in this direction that the industry is going in. I am forwarding for medical freedom. I do not like the things. And I say, so even if I'm alone, even if it's only 2% that join me, that's fine. But I think that we need to be able to have an out for the people that don't like what's happening and they want to be on the side of truth. And they need to know that there's other people that are supporting them and that they're not alone, because that's what dividing and conquer takes place. They've divided us. They've completely isolated us. And we feel like we've gone crazy in our own heads during the quarantines and lockdowns. And I would love to have another conversation again, because I know we're about ready out of time, just to go through and give you to share what I've witnessed these past 22 months.
Yeah.
And just having to re-challenge my beliefs of what is going on, and just watching all the crimes against humanity take place and having it front on and seeing what my own colleagues have done, and that I know that aren't bad people.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we have to, I think that we're at a point that we just got to get. And I think that I want to reach out to my colleagues that do. And I think that's why I felt compelled to do this today, is because we're at the start of a new year. I'm not going to repeat what we did into 2021. Right. We've got to come together, and those people that are on the side of truth, that want, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to work together to figure out what to do. And I'm here with no judgment. And so
she kind of made a great point that I want people to understand. And there's two different types of ways of looking at truth. From a logic standpoint, Fauci or anyone else standing in front of you and say, listen to me, I know what I'm talking about, is called authority-based logic. Now, it also happens in football stadiums, football teams, when the general manager says, I'm the authority, but the buck stops with me. Now, I'm a business owner as well. The same kind of thing happens. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily right. So when you have someone that says, listen to the science, or he says this, so therefore I'm going to believe it. I know of a guy named Oliver, and he keeps pushing this. Well, my daughter is a physician and she believes this kind of stuff. See, that is in a faulty level of logic. What happens is that real logic follows patterns of verification. And that's what we're asking for. Hey, man, you want to get vaccinated? Go for it. You want to wear a mask? Go for it. You want to wear polka dots? I don't care what you want to do. And I don't care what football team you like, okay? Those are called preferences and decisions that you make in your life. But don't raise them to the level of verification or truth, because they're not standing in truth yet. Okay.
Right. Absolutely.
That's the key that you have to do. And here's the problem that the world is struggling with, and you have to be really, really careful in this one. You have liability when you tell people to do something that is actually harmful for them. And this is the problem that happens when you talk about child abuse. When you have allowed something to happen, you're actually liable for child abuse. When I have, done something, to another person, like a woman, and I would hit her, I'm liable for that, that activity. And I'm liable for the activity as a business owner. I mean, I have liability insurance, and I know Dr. Laura does too. And we have liability for even someone slipping on the carpets, in our businesses. And we have people who are out there pushing, this vaccine for everyone out there. And I go, wait a second, do you understand what that puts you in? It puts you in a liability category that you are in trouble over if it's false. And I would be very, very, very safe on that point. I'm not talking about being safe vaccine-wise. I'm talking about being safe from a legal standpoint. So I know we're kind of going on these things, but we kept coming back to truth. And I want you to think critically, okay?
Correct.
Throw things out that don't have logic. And I'm not talking about authority-based logic, about logic and verification. So I appreciate you listening to us. Thank you, Dr. Laura. We're going to do some more fun. We're going to have a lot of fun together with it too.
No, absolutely. And I'm really excited, and it's been awesome just working with you. I'm really excited about challenging our profession, not in a bad way, but there's a lot of things that I think that we've all learned over the years that we can do a better job. And I think that it's time, and that's kind of the direction I'm going in. So it's been awesome. And thank you so much for, starting this. And I'm really looking forward to what we're gonna be able to move forward with.
All right. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, guys.
Okay. Take care. Bye.